One of my relatives called me the other day and he said he was listening to the podcast and he was taken by your voice, Michael. He said you sounded just like Lloyd Grossman, the man that makes the pasta sauces.
Tipping Liverpool to stay up this year.
Thanks for explaining how the Premier League works then.
Enjoy that now.
No.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Football Times podcast. This isn't my third attempt at getting it right, and I am RadioTimes.com sport editor Michael Potts, and I'm joined in the virtual studio by Mr. Jake Wilson of BBC Match of the Day magazine. How you doing?
Ever professional, aren't we, Michael? We are the elite podcasters in the business. There's no denying it now.
I mean, I only forgot my name twice and my title every other time. So, you know, who's to say we've polished it over lockdown. But once again, it's coming over on my shiny new mic. It's all good. You need to get in the game here. We'll be bringing you some of the biggest Premier League games of the weekend and how to watch them all. It's a big old derby weekend. We have three huge derby games for you to soak up. As well, we're going to be chatting about the biggest derby games in the country as well. I mean, everybody has their own choices, everybody has their own decisions, and most of them are wrong. But we will be bringing you some of our personal favourite derbies in the country, as well as the usual fantasy Premier League tips. And I've got a pretty big move up my sleeve this week, and it's a risk. And I have 5 million in the bank now. It's a big risk, but we'll come to that in time. Let's just dive straight into it, shall we? Big weekend of derby games, and I mean, where else to start than Liverpool versus Everton? It's a Merseyside derby. It's a 5:30 kickoff on Sky Sports Premier League main event and Now TV. That's on Saturday. So a Saturday evening Merseyside derby. How are you feeling about this? I mean, Liverpool, I think we just have to write them out of this title race for now. And honestly, there's no shame in not being in the title race. I think everybody's got so much on, you know, they absolutely have to defend. They have to get 99 points. They have to progress and get 100 points. Like ultimately all incredible things come to a slightly muted lull. I mean, they're not done, are they? They're still a great team.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a lull. I think we need to remember, maybe something we haven't addressed on this podcast yet, is this is the hardest season for teams to deal with maybe ever. So we had that extended season last year with that tiny little break. Teams in European contention had even less of a break. And now we've got all these games packed into short spaces, changes left, right and centre. You know, Liverpool are competing in 4 or 5 tournaments. It's a lot for any club, let alone one with the injuries that Liverpool have sustained. So for them to deal with that, and Klopp personally, he's obviously had the tragedy back home in Germany with his mother. You know, we can only wish him the best there, and hopefully he can grieve that properly. But there's obviously so many obstacles and hurdles surrounding that club that, yes, they aren't Manchester City. They aren't flying through every game, but they're there or thereabouts, and the signs are all there for when a few of these jigsaw pieces fall back into place, that things will be fine there and they will succeed once again.
Absolutely. I think we're all guilty of it, myself included, of almost seeing football like Football Manager and sort of as robots and, you know, guys who don't have lives apart from managing the teams or turning up any given Saturday. I think I don't want to use this as an excuse for everything, because obviously every team has to deal with the same problems, the same issues, or loosely the same, including Man City. But I know what you mean. There's this. I don't want to say unprecedented, but there is this unprecedented level of upheaval and the logistics, the travel, I think just the weariness of actually, that'll be the only time some of these guys leave the house, really, like all of us. They are working from home most of the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, obviously slightly better than our homes, I'm sure. But they too don't, you know, can't blow off steam. Defeats, they may stew on them a bit longer. They've got that bit more time to do that, and it's really hard to quantify what the issue is. But I think that goes beyond sort of physical injuries. I guess you're thinking about mental health, and you're thinking about just how players are coping with this. Like, there'll be some people who are struggling out there, I'm sure, just to just sort of get themselves up for games, especially in empty arenas as well. So I think there's a bit of an asterisk next to this season, and I think there's a bit of an asterisk more so this time around, because I mean the league was pretty much wrapped up last season. It was pretty much done. But I think there is a bit of an asterisk this season. Obviously, fair play if Man City go on to win it, they've thoroughly deserve it. But interesting.
Definitely. And I think there's a bright light for Liverpool in amongst all this. Yes, their form hasn't been perfect, but Curtis Jones, I think this is a proper breakthrough year for him. I think in the past, we obviously known how talented he is. He was really highly rated at all the youth levels he played in. But this year he has become a starter for Liverpool. He's definitely first choice midfield ahead of, say, Oxlade-Chamberlain or a Milner. I don't think he'd be in the full strength makeup of that midfield with Fabinho and Henderson and Thiago. But he's definitely next in line, and I think that's such a brilliant development for them. While he's on the rise, like Thiago came in as Liverpool's new midfielder, and he's kind of struggled to settle. Maybe the pandemic's had something on that, a kind of a player coming from a foreign league. It's hard to settle at the best of times, so he might struggle with that. But, Jones was a couple of years ago, was Liverpool's youngest ever captain, and he's definitely developed so much more from the player we saw in those couple of cup games. He's great on the ball, and now he's working really hard off the ball, harrying, hustling, properly playing for the team in a position they need him to. And for Liverpool, there's a lot of kind of black marks against their season and things they would have liked to have happened differently. But if you want to look for the positives, if you want a silver lining, and I'm sure there are lots if you're a Liverpool fan, really, Curtis Jones is certainly one.
I think Curtis Jones as well, the thing that's impressed me most is he's just so confident. He looks so comfortable. I think he really wants the ball. He doesn't look like he's there to make up the numbers. He's actually taking the ball in midfield, moving with it, and then even if it's not a wonder ball or a perfect slid through ball or something, he is doing useful things with it. He's just looks quite an intelligent player, I think, in the middle there. And like you say, young player. Good to have him in that setup, hopefully for a brighter next season for Liverpool. But there is still games to play, and I'm sure, let's say, top four. I honestly think, is there any difference between second and fourth? Like, really? There's not particularly. I think if Liverpool Sorry, go for it, Jake.
Now, when you got that quality, they will get through those knockout early qualifying rounds, and they are a disadvantage, but long term they're still going to get to the group stage. They're still going to be fine, I think it would be hard not to imagine Liverpool picking up a little bit of form and getting that fourth spot at least.
Absolutely, and I think, like I say, if you're coming off the back of two nearly invincible seasons, including your Premier League title, I think finishing fourth, I'm not just saying this as an excuse because it's Liverpool or anything like that, but I think that's good enough. I think that's good enough for this season, and then rebuild and go again. Liverpool-Everton, what is your prediction? So we haven't really talked about Everton, actually. I think we mainly were going to focus on Liverpool, but no disrespect to Everton at all there for any Toffees fans listening out there. Everton, bit of an inconsistent team. DCL, they're missing DCL a bit. I chatted to Lee Dixon the other day for an interview about Dominic Calvert-Lewin and John Stones as well for City, and he's very impressed with Calvert-Lewin. Thinks he's a very good rough and tumble sort of striker. Likened him a little bit to Duncan Ferguson, to Big Dunk, in the way that he plays. Doesn't think it's a coincidence that actually Ferguson is the guy coaching him behind the scenes. So we wait to see which Everton side is going to turn up, but should be a good game. What is your...
Definitely, Everton are really strong, and I think the inconsistency is part of this weird season we're having. This week I've been writing an article on the best Champions League teams ever, and a certain Everton manager features very heavily in that top 10 list. Carlo Ancelotti knows that's it. He knows how to put a squad together. He doesn't get too excited when his team scores, as is seen from his FA Cup goal celebration, blowing on his Bovril. And yeah, I think Everton are on a definite upward trajectory under him. This one, though, Liverpool-Everton games aren't the best. As history has said, the last 7 results are 2-2 earlier in the season. Then you got 0-0, 1-0, a 5-2 out of nowhere, and then a 0-0, 1-0, and 0-0 again. I think this is one of those games that neither side wants to lose. The fan bases demand that there isn't an L next to their name after this game. So I would see a 1-1 draw here.
I'm going to go a little bit more extravagant. I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. And I've also got, I'm going to say, let's say 14 seconds in the Jordan Pickford, Virgil van Dijk sweepstake. I'm going to give it 14 seconds before we have that come up. So get your stopwatches out, because usually mention that tackle in games not involving Liverpool or Everton. So let's give it 14 seconds. Moving on, West Ham versus Tottenham. It's a London derby. Both teams kind of very different moods around the camps, I guess, at the moment. Very tight league. There's still only 6 points separating them. Spurs 6 points behind them, but with a game in hand. But the form, very different trajectories. And West Ham, we've got to talk about West Ham. They're 5th in the league. They're joint with Chelsea in 4th. They've won 3 of the last 5. They've only lost 1 of those. It's just fantastic, isn't it, really? It's fantastic from West Ham so far. Didn't see this happening.
It's the Moyes of old. We're seeing that being rebuilt in him, that bit of confidence in his own choices. He did brilliant at Preston, got him the move to Everton. He spent over a decade there creating a brilliant team that was challenging at the top, got European football regularly. And he had a few dodgy moves. United shook him a little bit, I think, obviously, from his Sunderland days, and he tried abroad and it didn't all quite work out.
Nope.
But this is it, second bite at the cherry at West Ham, and a bit of time, a bit of space away, maybe when lockdown was in, and he's get his team all pulling in the same direction. And I don't think that's something that West Ham fans have been able to say about their team for quite some time. Under Pellegrini, they thought that might be it. The big marquee manager didn't quite happen. But now they do seem to have a cohesive unit that does want to work hard, that does want to put in those extra yards and play together. It's all well and good having Dimitri Payet score 15 goals and smash them in from all angles, but they only count the same as Mikel Antonio stabbing one in at the back post after a well-worked team move. Absolutely. So, I think they've got a really good blend there, and on a very different trajectory to Spurs.
Well, I was just going to jump in on there on West Ham before we go to Spurs, but I'm looking at their stats and everything now. Oh, sorry, no, hang on, nah. Before we move on to Spurs, a quick note on West Ham. Something that we didn't see from Moyes' days at Sunderland. Thanks, Dave. Totally forgotten that. Totally doesn't hurt anymore. But no, I really like his quotes after the Sheffield United game, actually. I'm sorry, it was before the Sheffield United game the other day. He came out and said, the good thing is we've got another gear or two from what we have shown tonight. We can play better, and I think there is another level for the players to go to. My aim is to get them there by the end of the season, get them really up at the top level. That's exciting, and that's what West Ham fans want to hear. They want to hear a manager who isn't satisfied with 3-0 wins, like who wants to go there, attack teams, and actually keep adding to those wins, and not just, like you say, not just the occasional flash in the pan, big win or world-class goal from Payet, somebody like that. But they actually want to go out there and just collectively improve their whole game. Jesse Lingard, I don't want to jump on the hype train straight away and suggest he's going to be an absolute world beater. But the sort of player that David Moyes brought through at Everton, sort of those slightly less fashionable items, or the guys who weren't always the biggest guys at the top clubs, and Moyes would just get the most out of them. And Lingard is, he shows his talent for England, maybe not so much for United in the past, But somebody like that thrown into the mix, and let's say after a 3-0 win, saying that you want better, you want more, you want another level, another gear. I think that's a very exciting time for West Ham fans.
Definitely, you want managers who get the most out of the players at their disposal. You don't want someone who's just collecting these stars from big clubs, as maybe West Ham have been seen to do before. If Moyes can get the most out of players like Kufal and Souček and Lingard, like you said, the less fashionable players, surely that's a more economic and more sustainable way to go forwards. And then maybe to move on. When you talk about managers maybe not getting the full pace and strength out of their players, we move to Spurs, don't we?
I was going to say Moisinho, who would have predicted at the start of the season would be sitting here saying that Jose Mourinho should learn from David Moyes. I mean, heck of a year. But yeah, Mourinho, it's all going wrong. It's all going wrong about a season too early. Like I say, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt in that it is such a tight league, and one win, again, a win in this one against West Ham, and they're 1 point off Liverpool. I think you've got to put Spurs in their performance in context here. Like, it's a very tight league, and everybody's losing games against everybody else, unless you're Manchester City. But yeah, you just wonder what's going on behind the scenes there. I saw a couple of articles saying that Harry Kane, these insider articles saying Harry Kane still has sort of full support for Mourinho, but I guess what else can you say? But they're definitely a team who, like West Ham, if Moyes thinks they've got an extra gear when they're winning games, I mean, Spurs are in second at the minute, surely. Like, Spurs are, they're just scraping along, really. And I love Mourinho. I love his style. I love his underdog mentality. His backs against the wall and Mourinho against the world. I like that. But there comes a time when I think you just need to try something different, and you just need to try just releasing the handbrake a little. That's the metaphor I keep seeing used, and I think it's a very good metaphor for it. Just ease it off a little bit, Jose.
Yeah, I think it's just a funny time because the malaise at Spurs seems like team-wide. You look up and down the pitch and the players aren't right. There's something behind their performances that isn't working. Lloris has not been the same last few weeks, and it seems to have come all on a sudden that people are writing him off as past it, and I'm not sure that's quite the case. No. You look at the defence, and they're equally making mistakes across the board. Like Dyer and Sanchez and even Alderweireld are making these mistakes. The midfield doesn't look as cohesive as it has. Dembele and Højbjerg have been lauded earlier this year, but they're in a bit of a rut. And then, as we saw against Man City, they didn't really create anything because I think they shut down Kane from dropping in deep and playing balls, and Son wasn't quite there. Yes, there's a lot of games and fatigue does play into everything, but there's a lot of players that Mourinho isn't getting a tune out of. Like, I'm a Wolves fan, and I, very vocal about that on this pod, just a little. But the Matt Doherty thing is wild to us Wolves fans, because he was an outstanding player for us for a number of years, one of the best fullbacks attacking wise in the division last year, and he has completely regressed. This year he doesn't seem to have that confidence. He's not getting the assists, he's not getting up the field. He scored so many for Wolves last year across all comps, and there is definitely something that isn't right there, and I'm not pinning it all on Mourinho. That's because I definitely don't have the insight of the club there, but it's a hard contrast not to see right now when we're talking about West Ham with all these players that aren't the best players in the world, but are playing towards their potential. And at Spurs, so many of the players aren't.
Absolutely. It's interesting to watch. And like I say, they're still in with a shout. They're still in with, it's very close with a lot of football to be played. But yeah, something needs to change there, because that overall, we're talking about Liverpool having a lull, and maybe they'll come back next season just as strong. Spurs, I hate to say it, but Kane is getting a little bit older, and Kane is, the injuries are piling up. And I'm not saying he's a phenomenal striker, and he is probably one of the only players, him and Son, who haven't actually, completely lost it. But you need to make the most of a player like him when he comes along. And is Mourinho the guy who is going to make the most of a Harry Kane? Is he the guy who's going to lead Spurs to a Premier League title or there or thereabouts? Even in a title race, we haven't really seen them, that hard in the title race. So it's an interesting one. We'll keep an eye on it. Obviously, everybody at home will be too. And you can watch that game. Where can you watch that game, Michael? Yes, I'll tell you now. It's on Sunday. It's a 12 o'clock kickoff. It's on Sky Sports Premier League and main event. What's your prediction for it?
This one's really hard to predict because it is the exact sort of game after, getting shown up that Spurs on the counter hit West Ham hard and steal. And I think that potential is too strong for me. So I think they might nick it a 1-0 on the break.
I'm going with a bit of a fearless West Ham win. I like West Ham. I agree. I think it's a very unpredictable game, but I'm going with a little 1-0, like a Jared Bowen. Let's go with Jared Bowen. We'll go with him for this one. But yeah, tight game in store on Sunday lunchtime. And finally, we've got to move on to probably the biggest game of the year. As any long-time listeners will know that we have a bit of a fascination with this one because it's a derby that just like really isn't a derby, but let's go for it anyway. It's the Glen Murray M23 derby. Big round of applause. Oh, I'm coughing, I'm spluttering. I'm just that excited, Jake Wilson, for the Glen Murray M23 derby between Brighton and Crystal Palace. It's the weirdest derby on the calendar. They're at either ends of the M23, I guess. That's a Monday night. It's Monday Night Football as well. Huge on Sky Sports Premier League main event and Now TV 8 o'clock kickoff. I have been looking forward to this all week. I don't know about you, but the Glen Murray M23 derby, that doesn't come around too often. Seriously though, two interesting teams. Again, different looking form charts, both sort of lingering around the bottom half of the table. Where do you want to start with them, really?
Yeah, it's not the longest running derby. It's not the most historic, potentially. But I think this one specifically has come at a really interesting time for both clubs. They're both similarly placed in that kind of lower mid-table space. But I think the feelings in the camps, maybe like West Ham Spurs, are really different. So I think we'll start with Brighton because they have more quality team-wise than I think we give them credit for. You look at their squad and maybe they aren't the most dynamic and they're not the most pacey and they're definitely not the most clinical. They really need to score some goals, please. But you look at the players there. You've got Joel Veltman, who they got for less than £1 million. He should have been in the Champions League final. A year before. Then you've got Davy Propper plays for Holland. You've got Pascal Gross, who's very, very good on the ball and gets loads of assists. They have quality up and down. A lot of talk was on Tariq Lamptey. So yeah, I think we should give them some credit. They beat Liverpool recently. They beat Spurs. And they should have won more games if they could put the ball in the net. I think that was evident in the Villa game recently where they drew 0-0. It really looked like they should have won that. Emi Martinez got a lot of credit, rightly so. He's been excellent this year. But I think so have Brighton, and they're on a good path for me.
Absolutely. I think Brighton, 11 draws on Brighton's list, more draws than anybody in the league. Just shows you, isn't it, that need for a 10, 15, well, not 10, 15, 20 goal striker. I keep thinking about the season Sunderland had Darren Bent, and the amount of games, the amount of 1-1 draws, 0-0 draws that were just transformed into 1-0 wins and 2-1 wins. It's incredible. And if Brighton find something like that, then we'll see where they go from there. But until they can do that, they are 16th, and Fulham are catching, and Fulham are making a damn good effort at getting back into this race.
They've got one of those strikers that nick those goals that you were talking about in Josh Maja, haven't they? This is another ex-Sunderland striker that puts the ball in the net when he needs to.
Sweet Josh. He used to live in my friend's bedroom when she.
What?
Yeah, I know. she.
Were they still there? Was they
Well,
roomies?
in a
Was that what you said?
sense, she went travelling the world, and while
Uh,
Josh Maja was banging in the goals in League One during that one big season, Maja, yeah, he was living in her bedroom with her parents and all that sort of stuff. Parents like cooking his dinners and stuff. So good times, good times. But yeah, I mean, Josh Maja, great player. Fulham back in the race. But yeah, Brighton, they're 7 points clear of Fulham. You wonder. Yeah, a little bit nervous, but they do have 27 points, 26 points, and that's a decent enough total for now. And moving on to Palace before we get too bogged down in a Josh Maja Maya, we have Palace who I can't decide what to think about Palace because I love Roy Hodgson. I'm such a big fan of Roy Hodgson. And by the way, when I was doing my little research for this, I love the on the Brighton the M23 Derby Wikipedia page because that's a thing. It has Roy Hodgson, current manager of Palace, has stated that he does not recall any such rivalry with Brighton as a Palace fan in the 1950s and 60s. So, so you know, if Father Time himself can't remember this derby, we have to call it into question. I think it grew in the 70s and 80s. Interesting with Roy Hodgson though, because for all he is doing an incredible job overall in the grand scheme of things, does there come a point where Palace have to be a little more ambitious? I so respect what he has done. I respect the man. I think he is an excellent manager, and he has carved out a tremendous project for himself in Croydon. You do just wonder with the likes of Zaha, with the likes of Eze, you know, that those players are going to eventually, somebody is going to come in for Zaha. If he wants to leave, he could walk out the door at any time, pretty much. Eze is another player whose stock has just risen immeasurably this season. He was a great player in the Championship. Now he's proven it at the top flight. He's the sort of player who you could see a 30, 40 plus million price tag slapped on his head in the summer. Yeah. Are they going to be able to replace those players if they do leave? And should they be trying to make the most out of them while they're here now? It's a tricky one because it's hard to fault what Hodgson has done, but you know, could they be aiming higher?
I think a lot of their fans would agree that they should be. By the looks on social media and it, you know, in the public sphere, the Palace fans are angry. They're frustrated by the inconsistency. Like they beat Wolves pretty comfortably. It was only 1-0, but we didn't really lay a hand on them, Wolves. But then they were, by all accounts in the media, insipid against Burnley. Roy Hodgson criticised their determination compared to the Burnley players, and that's not something you want. And I think this is a bit of a turning point because they aren't bad. You know, they're not terrible, Palace, but they aren't particularly good. And I think there's a few things that could change. There's a lot of players out of contract this summer at Palace. You've got Patrick Van Arnholt that's been very vocal that he wants a move to I think a European club. Batshuayi's only there on loan, so we don't really know about him. But the likes of Townsend, Benteke, basically the whole defence is out of contract at the end of the season, as well as Hodgson and a lot of his staff. I think their contract's running down too. So this could be a time where they let some of those more expensive players go, bring in some younger players like they've done from the Football League or smartly from abroad, and then maybe Hodgson, if they can think of a viable alternative, there aren't loads to spring to mind. Maybe it is not the worst time for them to depart. It wouldn't be a sacking, so to speak. And they need to give him the credit he deserves and the respect he deserves. At this time, he's done wonderful there. You know, they could, if they win against Brighton, I think they're up to equal their record points tally at this point in the season. So it's not like they're not getting the points. It's not like they're struggling down in the mire. But you look at someone like Eddie Howe, who can play good football, but then has got the fight in his side as well. Yes, he got Bournemouth relegated and they'd spent money, so that's not the best. But someone like him, or taking a chance on a EFL manager, it might be the time to do that. But there other people will know better than me there. But they do have the players to push into the top 10, don't they?
I'm looking at their fixtures as well, and you feel like this could be a very this could be a crucial time for them. Really, they've like you say there was Wolves, then they went and beat Newcastle, which was great. But then 2-0 loss to Leeds, 3-0 loss to Burnley. Up next, obviously Brighton. Then they've got Fulham, Spurs, West Brom. It's a golden time for points, because after that, obviously, the games are going to pick up and get tougher. There's Everton, there's Chelsea, there's Leicester, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool. Like, they've got a tough run in to end the season. It's not an easy one, and so you do feel like this could be a crucial few games for Hodgson. And I still think they will stay up. I still think they will find a way. But I do wonder whether this is the time for a parting of ways. But again, not in a sort of taboo way, like not in a sort of like sack the guy or malicious way. But Hodgson came in; he was tasked with stabilize the club, establish us, keep us here. With little in the way of budget, they haven't really had that many huge money signings compared to the money they've made from the likes of Wan-Bissaka for 50 million out. So, yeah, I do think he's kind of both completed his brief, completed his mission, but maybe isn't the guy, to task with the next mission of cracking the top 10, of cracking Europe, of going to that next level, if that is what the board's ambition is. So I think, I agree. Interesting one. Definitely a contract situation to watch for the summer. Hodgson will get another Premier League job, I'm very sure. If he were to leave Crystal Palace, I could definitely see him staying in management should he want to. Just feels like it could be the natural end, or coming to the natural end for them. Anyway, enough of that. The Glen Murray M23 derby. Who is winning the illustrious trophy of pride, of bragging rights?
I think the glory is going to Brighton this time. Palace do have match winners, as we've said, but Brighton have that cohesive sense of direction. And if they could just put one of their probably 4 XG away, they might sneak it, I think.
All hail the XG. I'm going with a draw here. I'm not as sold on Brighton as you. The clinical, sometimes you just need to play ugly and win games 1-0, but we'll see. Speaking of derbies, probably this is the time to slip in. What's the biggest derby? What's the biggest game? We've got Liverpool-Everton there. I mean, it's probably up there, but they're a bit too friendly. They're a bit too pally. They sit next to each other. Bit weird. Bit weird.
The results aren't the best either, so you want something that's got a bit more drama, maybe.
I want to throw one of the most entertaining derbies for the last 10 years even has been City United. That's been up there with the most entertaining. In terms of biggest, in the UK, we'll say in the English football leagues, because we obviously know Old Firm is an enormous thing.
Old Firm written down. I spoke to WWE champion Drew McIntyre earlier this year, and he's from Ayr, Scotland, and he says he goes round the world, and the world over, when they say he's a football fan, people know about Old Firm and watch Old Firm and get excited about it. So I think that one does have to be up there if we did UK.
If we're doing UK, my word, it's absolutely up there. I thought let's just throw it in there anyway. But in terms of English football, I think Man United Liverpool is another obvious one. Personally, is that the biggest? I think it could well be. It's in terms of history of the clubs, proximity of the clubs. Some of the big games and players that have been in those games throughout the years. It's up there. I miss Man United Arsenal actually. I always Man United Arsenal growing up was the one for me. I mean, Keown going nuts on Van Nistelrooy is just something that you can't really imagine from those two sets of players now. But I'm a big fan of that. And obviously, I've got to shout it out. The Weir Tyne, or the Tyne Weir derby, Sunderland v Newcastle, and Newcastle v Sunderland. I mean, we don't like them in many ways, but my word, can we put on a show? It's, I've seen Lee Cattermole booked in the first 15 seconds of that game. It was one of my favourite.
quicker than Virgil van Dijk versus Jordan Pickford gets mentioned, eh? Come
Yeah,
on,
I know.
straight in
I'm
there.
sorry. It was straight in there. Yeah, it was straight in there. Like I think I can't remember what the exact second. It was in the first minute, and it was. I'm sure it was in the teens for seconds, and he got a yellow card, and it's just like, well, that's his game over. Wonderful occasions. Obviously, we have an excellent run at the moment. Haven't lost in what feels like 50 years, but yeah, it's probably about 10. Fantastic games. I remember being pinned to the floor at the Stadium of Light. There was a few people fell over a few rows of seats when Eunice I can't believe it's happening, but Eunice Kabul floating in crosses for Stephen Fletcher and Billy Jones. They both scored in a 3-0 at the Stadium of Light. Up there with the best. And one if you will indulge me in one final anecdote of Sunderland Newcastle games. My dad, he's not a massive football fan. He's not a big football. I don't come from a big footballing family, and but my dad, we when Paolo Di Canio was in charge, it was the first 3-0, which I like to say the first 3-0, out of the 3-0s. We watched that at my friend's house. We scored twice, 2 really good goals. My dad, he gets up for some of Newcastle games pretty much, got up for it, he celebrated the goals sort of thing, like clapped in the room. David Vaughan, go and type it in. David Vaughan against Newcastle scored the third goal to kill it off. That goes down in history as one of my favourite ever goals. And my dad jumped up, picked me up. I don't know how old I was at the time, but I was 6 foot plus. And nobody's picked me up for a while. Nobody can pick me up. My dad picked me up and swung me around like a rag doll. And I was just like, if that isn't what this game means to people in the Northeast, it was phenomenal. It was an unbelievable story. And credit to, I'm not dare to say it, but credit to Newcastle fans for turning up in 50,000 droves. We put on a show in the Northeast. Do not. You've got to.
That's what football about, isn't it? Football's about those moments of emotion, and derbies give you that. We had
I've got shivers. Sorry, I've got like goosebumps across my arms. Anyway, sorry.
We had the first West Midlands derby, Wolves West Brom, in 9 years this season. And yes, it did not go our way, but the anticipation, the build to it was brilliant. Obviously, we lost and we hated that, and we will right that wrong very shortly. But yeah, it's all about derbies. I'm going to give a shout out to the North London derby, to Arsenal Tottenham. And I loved some of their derbies. They've had some wicked goals, some proper iconic goals. That Danny Rose volley, where he's almost stretching for it, and he still manages to get under it, and it just zips straight as an arrow. The North London I really like too.
There was a 4-3, wasn't there? There was like it was David Bentley involved or something in that one. Maybe I'm thinking back.
No, I think you're right. There's one where Theo Walcott's going off on a stretcher as well, jeering at the fans.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. The one where Theo Walcott get a hat trick in one as well? I
think it's the same one.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Derbies are great, but the best is so subjective. It changes all the time. Like you said, maybe once we would have said Liverpool, Man United being the best, but I think that's lost a little bit of its gleam in my mind. So you want one of the proper historic ones for me. So that's why I'm shouting out North London.
I think the criteria is there's got to be pretty much the only criteria. I think there's got to be close proximity, but not in the same city. I always think same city rivalries are a bit weird. Like again, I'm thinking of Sunderland Newcastle here. 13 miles difference. A lot of people from Sunderland work in Newcastle, bigger sort of town centre. A lot of Sunderland fans work in Newcastle. A lot of Newcastle fans will work in Sunderland. And but apart from that, like you just don't see a Newcastle shirt for 363 days a year. You just don't see a Sunderland shirt in Newcastle 363 days a year. It doesn't happen. Like it's tribalism. It's like a healthy tribalism because it's I've never been involved in any trouble there. There's been scuffles and whatever there, but it's a generally fairly well behaved derby. I'm seeing that, but I don't know the stats behind it. But I think there's something about being in different cities, and that is your city, and that is their city, and there's 2 days a year where you come together and and that's it. That's your city versus the other city. I think that's a little bit different with Liverpool, because I'm like being an Everton fan, but also supporting Liverpool as a city. That feels weird to me. I like to own that city, and Liverpool and Everton fans, I'm sure they'll cross each other in the streets. They'll live together. Blah blah blah. Sun and Newcastle. It's a part, man. It's a part. Get yourself up to a game. Anyway, I think we've rambled on far too long there, but I love talking about derbies. We're going to run a poll as well. We're going to run a poll for the biggest derby matches in the country. I don't know how I'm going to narrow this down. Maybe I have to do 2 polls. We'll see, but we'll read out the biggest games next. We might even have a little knockout round, shall we? Two sets of 4. The winners go through to a final.
I'm up for it, and if we miss any out, do shout us out on the Twitters.
Yeah,
we want to bring this in.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's a few lower league derbies as well, which we've being sort of not traditionally lower league fans. We have probably omitted you, so please get in touch. Tell us your biggest derby games. We'll shout you out next week. Final quick one before we go: Fantasy Premier League. It's another big old week of games. I feel like there's an onslaught at the moment. Any striking tips for you at the moment?
Oh, well, first I need to thank you. Last week you shouted out Matt Lowton on the pod.
My boy.
And I was thinking maybe Pope, but I went Lowton with you, mate. And he only scored an absolute corker, didn't he?
What a guy. I mean, I knew that was going to happen. So,
double figures of points. So thank you for that one, mate. It's appreciated. I've gone Gundogan in for Sterling. I did it mid-game at the weekend. I'm done with Sterling, and I think if you don't have Gundogan, you have to get him. But I want to give a shout out to Neto, because we talk about these differentials, don't we? The mid-range players. And I know you had Neto, but I think when you look at the stats that he's had compared to some of the other players that maybe we've spoke about, he comes across really favourably. So he's got more goal involvements in the Premier League than anyone else, 21 or under. So that's more than Foden, more than Saka, more than Ferran Torres, Hudson-Odoi, Smith Rowe. He's got more than any of them. He scored 5 goals, 4 assists, and he's top 5, top 10 for chances created across the division. So if Willian Jose, who I shouted out the week before, if he can start heading some in, get more involved in Wolves' games, Neto's FPL points should be consistently good. So he's definitely one to watch. If he gets a little run going, maybe he's one to have on sub 1, as you love, Michael.
Love a sub 1. Love a sub 1. Love a sub 1. I've gone with obviously we have a couple of double game weekers in here this time around. Not many, but I've made a pretty big change. I have taken Son out. So now I don't have either Son or Kane. Took Son out for Rafinha. So I've saved about 4 or 5 million there, which is pretty hefty. My midfield now is Fernandes, Salah, Grealish, Gundogan, and Rafinha. It's not bad, and I have £5 million in the bank. So I've got a couple of like decent defense. I don't quite know where the money. I think it's up front. I think because I've got Bamford, Antonio, Calvert-Lewin. None of them are like premium price strikers, but I think we need to all run away from premium price strikers at the moment, because they're not really showing that sort of premium cost. But Rafinha, he's on a great little run of form. His last few games, he got 13 points, 5, 9, 6, 5. And he's in a double game week now against Wolves and Southampton. 2 games that I guess last season or earlier in the season would have been a lot tougher games, no offence, but I think there's some goals in there for him. And I've gone one step beyond, and I've made him captain. I've made Rafinha captain.
Wow.
So I was tossing up between Bamford and Rafinha. I feel like Rafinha, he's got a bit of a dual threat in terms of assists and goals. Massive differential. I think as a one-off, I'm willing to back that. But yes, get aboard the Matt Lowton hype train. They have West Brom at home this week. Also a bit of a shout for Man United. Wan-Bissaka, Newcastle at home. Could be an interesting one. Something like Fernandes, potential captain if you don't have any Leeds players. I think that's just about enough. I think that felt like a fairly long one, but a good one. As always, from the boys. Mr. Jake Wilson,
Please don't call us the boys again.
Sorry,
We haven't earned that. We haven't earned that title yet.
I know. I mean, I looked at the open window there and just thought, jump, Michael, and just run. Oh, well. I mean, it was going so well. What's coming up at Match of the Day magazine this week, Jake Wilson?
Yeah, refocusing. It's a little bit special, Match of the Day. That's because we have launched a new quiz special into the world. It's on shelves, and it is special. So in there is the ultimate quiz package. Everything to do on your own, to do with your family. Young football fans are going to be... overwhelmed, but in the best way for here. And we've got some really special match stacks in there, the extra best of the best, and a king-sized Trent Alexander-Arnold card, shiny and beautiful. It's worth checking out. This one, it's a good.
Very good, very good. I'm sure it's always great, but particularly great this week. Also, there's a little flower sort of dangling over your camera. Is that a little flower? It looks like a little mistletoe. What is that?
It's kind of a big plant.
Like reaching out, yeah, fair enough. Just looked like a little mistletoe. Anyway, good job. I'm on the other end of the call and not in the same room. Thank you very much, Jake, for joining me. You can come to radiotimes.com /TV/sport for all of your latest sporting previews. We have the Australian Open final. That's dominating this weekend as Naomi Osaka goes up against Jennifer Brady. And in the men's, we have Novak Djokovic facing the winner of Stefanos Tsitsipas or Daniil Medvedev. Once you listen to this, you probably know which one to blank out of that equation. Tsitsipas, born a month after World Cup 98 final. So if you don't feel old, now you do. Thank you very much for listening. See you next week. Cheers.